Let's talk about the person because of whom the whole world argues, quarrels, and splits into camps. This video is for those who speak Russian but no longer live in Russia, for those who are building their lives in the United States of America, Canada, Europe, Israel, or Australia, who works, pays taxes, raises children, and tries to follow the laws of the country they now live in. Today, we'll talk about the person because of whom the whole world argues, quarrels, and splits into camps, Donald. Not just the newspaper image or memes, as they say on social media, but about why millions of ordinary Americans, people like you and me, decided that he is their leader, that he represents their interests. We will analyze who votes for Trump, how he differs from both the Democrats and regular Republicans, what he does in domestic and foreign policy, what successes he achieved during his first term and now in the first year of his second term, and most importantly, what kind of model of the world he wants to build. Believe me, this is not propaganda. It's an attempt to calmly explain in plain language who Trump is and what he has brought means for us. Who votes for Trump and why? If you believe the media, it's some kind of marginalized extremists who vote for Trump. In reality, his core voter is someone who goes to work every day, doesn't live on welfare, pays taxes, doesn't want trouble with the law, and at the same time feels that the system doesn't hear him. She abandoned him, left him, forgot that he was on one hand one of their own, but on the other hand turned out to be an outsider. This is the working class, factories, construction, logistics, farmers. It's also part of the middle class, small business owners, self-employed people as they're called, people who don't live off grants but make a living by providing their services, their labor, their goods. Offer them to the customer. They are joined by Protestants, Catholics, and some Jewish communities who want to protect family values and want to protect children from aggressive ideology in schools. Veterans of the Army and law enforcement for whom respect for the country, the flag, and their service is important. A significant portion of national minorities, by the way, who support order and work, not revolutions and endless protests like they had in the countries they fled from. Among Russian-speaking immigrants, Trump has especially strong support from those who went through the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, its collapse, and the 1990s. People who have already seen once what happens when ideology takes over, when the government keeps interfering in everything from business to raising children. For them, Trump is not a perfect hero. He's a man who speaks in simple terms and promises fewer officials, so there will be less of them. I mean, less top-down imposed ideology and more respect for those who work and pay taxes. To understand Trump, you need to understand not only how he differs from the Democrats, but also from the old Republican elite. Democrats traditionally support big government, more regulation, a focus on social benefits, and a strong role for international organizations. Classic Republicans support business and low taxes, but are very closely tied to big capital and the military establishment. They support the global role of the United States military bases all over the world and interventions in the name of democracy. But Trump completely breaks this pattern, both of them. By the way, he used to be a Democrat, then switched to the Republicans. Trump has a different ideology, psychology, and views. For someone from the post-Soviet space, you could put it this way. The Democrats are the party of ideology and social engineering, while the old Republican establishment is the party of corporations and the military machine. And Trump is an attempt to focus on the national interests of ordinary citizens, Those who work, pay taxes, and don't live off the government. Domestic policy, economy, taxes, everyday life. For immigrants, the most important thing isn't ideology, but simple matters. Is there work? How much is left after taxes? Trump, how much does gas cost? How much is rent, mortgage, groceries? Trump, is it possible to run a business calmly and not be afraid that everything will change tomorrow with the new regulations? Trump's economic approach is based on several ideas. Trump lowers the tax burden on businesses and the middle class, and generally reduces regulations that stifle small and medium-sized businesses. To stimulate production within the United States rather than exporting jobs to China, Mexico, and other countries, and to use customs tariffs to protect American manufacturers. What does this mean for the average person, for people like you and me? If the economy is growing and it's easier for businesses to operate, then neither businesses nor jobs leave, and there are significantly more opportunities and job openings. Competition among workers starts to drive up wages, while cheap energy and reasonable inflation make life more predictable. People who vote for Trump see him as someone who puts their wallet and their job first, not some abstract ideas. Immigration and security. The topic of immigration is especially sensitive for Russian speakers. Many have gone through long interview lines, background checks, paid lawyers, sometimes quite a lot, and completed all the formalities. At the same time, they see on television how tens, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people are crossing the border without going through the process that legal immigrants went through. Donald Trump's approach to the immigration issue is simple and harsh. I would say yes, a country has the right to control its borders, period. A country has the right to control its borders. A country without borders is not a country. Illegal immigration should be minimized or eliminated completely, which is, well, practically impossible, right? Priority should be given to those who follow the rules, are qualified, want to work, and are ready to integrate, which is incredibly important. As it turned out, his critics say it's inhumane, while his supporters respond that it is humane. This is when the law applies equally to all, so immigrants who follow legal procedures don't have to compete with illegal workers accepting lower wages and not paying taxes. For many Russian-speaking people, Trump is a vote for immigration to be fair and orderly without illegals. Uncontrolled immigration leads to several more problems. First, there is tough competition for simple jobs that do not require education or training. As soon as there are a lot of illegals, Americans who are supposed to get more money by law for the same jobs end up left out. And we, the taxpayers, start paying for their benefits, paying for schools for their children and health care for all their families. Can this nonsense continue? Meanwhile, doctor wait times are rising and we're footing the bill. Larger class sizes are causing education quality to decline rapidly. In many areas where people with limited means used to live, the cost of renting housing has increased. Because prices are soaring, 3 or 4, sometimes even 8 immigrants are ready to rent one apartment together. In other words, from many points of view, large-scale immigration brings a lot of problems and takes away a lot of our money. We often don't have this money, so we borrow it from someone else with interest in order to cover these very costs of illegal immigration, and then we or our children have to pay this money back. At the same time, among the millions who arrive, there are naturally thousands of criminals who increase the crime rate on our streets and in our lives. Many of them don't shy away from murder. They've already committed rapes and murders in their past lives. And finally, something that is absolutely necessary to mention. The people who have arrived simply due to the political situation in the United States are changing the balance of our Congress, very often take part in voting, and have absolutely no understanding of the principles on which the United States of America is built and lives. Now, immigration itself is a very positive phenomenon, but only when society can control it. Foreign policy, stopping wars, and a new world architecture. For years, American foreign policy viewed the United States as the world's policeman. We intervene wherever we see fit. Under the banner of democracy and human rights, this was supported by both Democrats and many Republicans. The result of the war is enormous expenses, thousands of deaths, and millions of refugees around the world. Trump opposed this logic. His principle can be described as fewer endless wars. More deals and peace come from strength, not constant interventions. That is, to be so strong that no one would dare to mess with you. He's not a pacifist. By no means is he against a strong army. On the contrary, he wants a strong army. But he asks, why spend trillions of dollars and the lives of soldiers on conflicts that can be resolved through negotiations or some economic tools? For the world, this means an attempt to move from exporting revolution to a system where a strong state or strong states are responsible for their regions. Supervisors, yes, so to speak. Not global policemen, but regional policemen who negotiate with each other and manage crises without total wars. Well, it's a great idea. We'll talk a bit later about whether it's workable or not very clear. This is exactly what explains Trump's ideas that the world should not be governed by chaotic coalitions, but, as he said, by a limited circle of major players who take responsibility. Trump believes, and I completely support him in this, that the organization called the United Nations, is corrupt and absolutely useless. It should have been shut down a long time ago, kicked out of New York, and if they want, let them sit somewhere in Indonesia. Trump believes that none of the existing international organizations today can restrain or oppose major states such as the United States, Russia, India, or China. These countries will still do whatever they want, even if 3/4 of the countries that are members of the United Nations strongly object to it. Even a country like Israel, which is far from being a giant, doesn't pay attention to the United Nations. All the more so since there are 57 Muslim countries in the United Nations that vote as a bloc, and usually Ukraine, Russia, and a few other international mandates join them. The voting is always unfair. It's always the way the Muslims want it. So why bother spending time arguing or getting involved at all? Let them vote as much as they want. Why are the elites fighting Trump to the death? When you see with what fury part of the American establishment, officials, prosecutors, judges, politicians, and even a significant part of the media have come down on Donald Trump, it seems that this is no longer just a political struggle, but a fight for survival. Political battles are rarely this frenzied, because for many of them the question is literally this: either him or them. For decades, a unique ecosystem has formed around power in the United States, a network of people connected by money, blackmail, mutual agreements, and violations of the law. This isn't a conspiracy theory, gentlemen. It's simply a human habit to use the system for personal gain. It worked in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, it worked under Genghis Khan, and it works today. Corruption, lobbying, budget schemes, all of this has become layered with lawyers, consultants, and prosecutors who cover for each other. When Donald Trump came in from the outside in 2016 without a mandate from the old elites, without support from Washington circles, the system felt threatened. After all, a person with money and his own agenda doesn't follow the usual rules. He doesn't owe anyone, and that's why he's dangerous. He can expose what has been hidden for decades under a layer of beautiful words about democracy, justice, and equality, and all the other nonsense they love to say. For the corrupt part of the establishment, especially those who were in legal and law enforcement structures, Trump is the personification of judgment upon themselves. Some prosecutors, judges, and intelligence officers involved in political orders feel that if a serious investigation begins, It will hit them and hit them directly. They lived with a sense of inviolability, but now the fear of being held accountable for their own actions is becoming a driving force. That's why they resort to everything: fabricating charges, politicized trials, cunning legal maneuvers, and pressure through the media. Because if this system collapses, their personal inviolability will collapse as well. For them, Trump's return isn't just a change of power, it's a sentence. That's why they're desperately trying to stop him by any means. Legal and moral campaigns, accusations of extremism, everything, absolutely everything that can be used is being used. They're even willing to destroy institutions, replacing the laws of justice with political calculation. And the paradox is that the more actively they fight against him, the more people start to realize, if they're so afraid of the truth, then they must have something to hide. Trump has become a symbol not just of protest against the old elite, but a symbol of the people's revenge against a system that pretended for too long to serve everyone, while really serving only itself. To be continued. That's why for them this fight is a fight to the end, because behind it is not politics, but the instinct of self-preservation. Investments, trade, and deals with other countries. Trump always thinks in terms of deals, what we give, what we get. Is this beneficial for the American worker and taxpayer, in other words, the owner? He strives to ensure that companies not only take profits abroad, but also invest in production. In the United States. Trade agreements were fair, not one-sided, and partners did not take advantage of the open United States market while closing their own markets in relations with other countries. This is reflected in the fact that he always tries to turn a political conflict into an economic deal. Think about how brilliant it actually is to resolve political conflicts economically. You want access to our market? Great. Give us investments, create jobs and security for our trade, and we will trade with you for peace. It might seem a bit rough, yes, but for us in America, it's just common sense. Stop giving out security money for free. Let everyone participate and take responsibility. The achievements of the first and second terms in power, the achievements of the first, the achievements. During Trump's first term, the United States saw a combination of a strong labor market, tax cuts, and attempts to bring manufacturing back to America. His critics argue about the details, but supporters see the main thing. The economy was growing, unemployment became low, and businesses felt more confident. Returning to power for the second time, Trump relies on this experience and strengthens the same course, taking an even tougher stance on the border, putting even more pressure on international organizations, and attempting to reform the very structure of the federal bureaucracy. It's important to always check specific numbers, percentages, and dates against official statistics. Gentlemen, no matter what anyone tells you, but his supporters have a very simple feeling. With him, we lived better and more peacefully than without him. The group of 5 countries, a new world architecture. Trump, the concept that the world is gradually moving toward a system of several major centers of power. If we put this in simple terms, it turns out that, well, he came up with a group of 5 countries without which no serious issue in the world today can be resolved. Which countries are these? The United States, China, that's pretty clear, right? Russia, India, and Japan. Why exactly these? The United States is the largest economy, military power, and financial center. China is the main manufacturer, a giant, a rising superpower. Russia has a vast territory, resources, nuclear potential, and is the key to security in Eurasia. India is the largest democracy, a colossal market, and a growing military and technological power. Japan is a tech leader, major investor, and United States ally. There are other major countries in Asia, so why not Turkey, Brazil, Mexico, or even the Arab countries? Turkey is important, of course, but it's regional and in many ways depends on bigger players. Brazil and Mexico have large economies, but they don't have comparable military and technological power, balance, or global influence. Arab countries are important because of their resources and geography, but they are divided and don't act as a united front or a single center of power. Actually, Trump's logic is very simple. There are several key powers. They make agreements with each other, take responsibility for their regions, and maybe share responsibility when it concerns them both. And instead of endless wars, they build a system of agreements, investments, and trade. For Trump and his supporters, such a world is better than chaos, where every conflict becomes a reason for endless Western intervention, endless wherever we get involved. It may happen that these supporters of the country will subjugate the surrounding regions, and we will end up with practically 5 powers on the globe. Well, that's one possibility, and the question is whether what is happening now is better than what might result from this. But most likely, these 5 countries will both cooperate and compete with each other at the same time. And that's why it's quite difficult to imagine the complete subordination of the regions, well, let's call them regions of dominance. For example, America will continue to help Taiwan, which is clearly in close proximity to China, and to Japan as well, and Japan will obviously cooperate with South Korea. At the same time, there are huge regions like the Middle East, Africa, and Australia, which in this division do not fall under any category of influence or zone of influence. So this is not a division of the world into 5 parts, but rather an attempt to delegate the main conflict resolutions, which always happen and involve many players, but to delegate the decisions to those who have the power to stop them, because the United Nations does not have such power. We know very little about Trump's plans. So let's put it this way, not in detail. I can't start speculating on this topic and making things up for him about what is meant, but this is clearly still an untested scheme which, so to speak, well, to me it seems better than the neuter and impotent United Nations organization, or a world of small and medium-sized bandits without supervision. Because the scariest thing, of course, is a world of small and medium-sized bandits without supervision. So what was America for many years as the so-called international police gendarme? Yes, according to Trump's idea, this role is distributed among 5 countries, each of which will be responsible for its own designated region. Perhaps these 5 countries will create some kind of advisory body that will coordinate their joint efforts, but without the right to interfere in the internal affairs of any of the participating countries. In any case, this is a new entity, a new system. Maybe it will save the world from the inevitable explosion of the atomic bomb, or maybe it will leave everything as it is. Worse, it seems, are the subtitles. And finally, why do Russian-speaking immigrants need all this? The main question for us is not whether to love or not love or hate Trump. The main question is, what kind of country do we want to see where we now live, and what kind of world do we want to leave for our children? Those who vote for Trump are the ones who believe that the government should interfere less in their lives and businesses, that borders should be under control, and that the economy and jobs are more important than ideological experiments. America, speaking about the people who live here, should be strong, but it doesn't have to fight for half the world. You can agree with this, you can argue with this, but to make an honest choice in the United States, Canada, Europe, Israel, or Australia, you need to understand what it's all about in the first place. Personally, I absolutely don't care if the person who makes spare parts for the car that my mechanic installs beats his children on Fridays. Whenever something breaks, I really don't care about that, and I never ask my mechanic about it. And whether these parts were made by a person who beats his wife on Fridays, I really don't care how many legs, arms, or eyes. There's a person who created the software for my accounting program. Moreover, I don't even care about his hair color. It doesn't matter to me. He dances around the tree or hangs toys on it, or he likes to chop down these trees in the forest. All I care about, and as far as I know, everyone else in the world too, is the quality of the product and service. Health to the corner, the cost of the product and service, and aesthetics, if it has any relation to the product. In the same way, I don't care if my president is a braggart or if the Secretary of State likes young girls he travels with. I just said that as an example. I don't mean anything by it. What is the sexual orientation of the Minister of War, previously known as the Minister of Defense? I suspect that I know, but it doesn't matter. All I'm interested in is whether my life has gotten better under them. And that includes expenses, security, and confidence in the future. Personally, during the 4 years of Donald Trump's first term and almost a year of his second term, I found that millions of migrants were no longer entering the country. The length of the lines has decreased. The number of children in classrooms is starting to drop. 2 million people. Those who entered illegally have already left. Even in democratic cities, crime has decreased. They say that you can just walk around Washington at night without worrying, something you couldn't do for the past 20 years, not a single evening or night. Raids by white and black gangs, which are called Antifa and Black Lives Matter there, have decreased significantly. Based on reports and stories, drug imports into the country were decreasing significantly, if not drastically. Members of prison gangs are being arrested and deported, and they're being sent to prisons in Latin America. We pay prison guards what they consider good money and get rid of murderers, thieves, and rapists. Everyone is satisfied. In American terms, it's called a win-win. Everyone benefits. Except for the thieves and rapists, I see the country was shamelessly plundered both legally and illegally. I see that everything possible was done to deceive us about how many people voted and for what. Moreover, the Democratic Party keeps telling me that no one is cheating, but then why open up the possibility for cheating if you're not planning to cheat? By no means am I trying to say that the Republican Party, or to be more specific, Make America Great Again, always does everything right, or that its leaders are saints. No, except for Trump, they're not saints. But I know that what is happening in the country right now is happening for one specific purpose. The purpose is to make sure that what the founding fathers of this nation once created and envisioned continues to develop in this country, namely the protection of property, the protection of the individual, the protection of freedom, and the protection of institutions that work for the benefit of you and me. That's why, for me, Trump, with all his flaws and imperfections, is a gift from above. This is another chance for America to build an honest, free society. And I'm really afraid that if we blow this chance, no one will give us a third one. If this video helped you see the real meaning behind the media noise surrounding the debates about Trump, share it with your friends, especially with those who, having come from our post-Soviet world, might not understand or know enough about what's really going on. Because in the end, it all comes down not to the names of politicians, but to the kind of world our children will live in. For me, grandchildren as well. In a world of trade, agreements, and security, or in a world of endless wars, revolutions, and riots. And I would also like to know what you think about this. What is most important to you in a president? What is most important to you in your life? If you can't determine that, it will be difficult for you to decide which political figure or which political party truly represents your views and your interests. Thank you for your attention, and see you soon.